Hello, my name is Vince Toy, and I'm head of community lending and investment at Wells Fargo. I'm honored to be addressing you here today at the 111th NAACP National Convention. I know we wish we all could be gathered together in one place to mark this special day, but that's not possible. But importantly, the conversations held throughout the convention are ones that can and must take place as we work to move our communities forward together. Wells Fargo has partnered with the NAACP to provide financial education and access to resources to create and improve home ownership and support small businesses in African American communities. In March, Wells Fargo committed to invest up to $50 million in Black owned banks to support them to grow and to serve the communities that they operate in. In closing, we truly value our partnership with the NAACP and all the work that it does to move our communities forward. Enjoy the rest of the convention.
Hi, my name is Gigi Dixon, and I'm Senior Vice President and Senior Director of External Relations for Wells Fargo. Today, I'm very, very happy to bring this conversation to you about small business recovery in the wake of COVID 19 and other stresses that face our small and minority owned businesses today. From the beginning of the Paycheck Protection Program through June 30th of this year, Wells Fargo funded loans for more than 179,000 customers, with an average loan amount of $56,000, totaling $10.1 billion. 60% of those are for loan amounts of $25,000 or less, and 90% of these applicants have $2 million or less in annual revenue. Wells Fargo was very intentional about how we chose to address the issue of stress on small businesses. We came out of the gates focusing on the smaller and minority owned businesses, understanding that there could be a real possibility that these businesses got left behind in the stimulus packages that were being made available. We're very happy to announce that on July 9th, we took that a step further and we announced approximately $400 million small business recovery money called Open for Business Fund. And that fund was created by the donation of PPP processing fees that we received as a result of our participation in the program. The Open for Business Fund aims to help small businesses open, recover, and rebuild, particularly racially and ethnically diverse owned businesses. And this major initiative opens a new avenue for nonprofit organizations to deliver capital and credit and also technical assistance in the effort to make sure that we're having a recovery while sustaining business ownership in the Black community and other communities of color. And so I'm very pleased to make this awareness available to all of you who are joining us in this conversation. And I'd like to take it a step further because we've had meetings with our NAACP partners. We've talked about this Open for Business Fund. We've talked about the availability of the open application for CDFIs, which are community development finance institutions, for them to apply for some of these funds and make these funds available in local markets for business owners who need the funds. One of the things that's become very clear to us in the process of launching this program and providing access to the funds to the CDFIs is that lots of people don't know about the CDFI trade. And so we decided the most useful way to use our time today in this conference is to help you have a better understanding of what the CDFI trade is, what this platform is for accessing capital for small and minority owned businesses, and how you too can participate in this work if you're an entrepreneur or a business owner. So, with that, I want to introduce my colleague, Megan Tier. I've worked with her for many years. She is an absolute expert on CDFI financing. She is in our Community Development Finance group, and she is the head of our CDFI lending team. Megan?
Gigi, thank you so much. It is always such a pleasure to talk to you, and I'm thrilled to be here today and to share this conversation with you and the folks attending the convention. I thought I would start by giving some background on the CDFI industry. And you're right, it is an industry that's not as well known as it should be. Again, the acronym stands for Community Development Financial Institution. And it's really a network of over 1,000 organizations across the country that are focused on mission-based lending and technical assistance in underserved communities. You can be a bank and be a CDFI, a credit union, a nonprofit loan fund, and even a venture capital fund. And we tend to focus on the nonprofit loan funds when we're thinking about the CDFI industry, but it really is all of those types of financial institutions that may be mission oriented and that get certified by the US Department of Treasury to become a formal CDFI. So it's really an amazing network that should be more of a household name, but we're thrilled to have been supporting the industry for over 20 years at Wells Fargo, and more particularly to be supporting it with such a large infusion of capital through the Open for Business Fund this time around with the $400 million. I'd be happy to talk more, Gigi, about CDFIs and our history of working with them. And just want to see if that's where you want me to go with this.
No, Megan, that's a great segue into a little bit more deeper conversation about the fund and about CDFIs. I do think it would be very important to talk about the evolution of this particular trade or this platform of financial services that not many people are very familiar with. On the Open for Business Fund, one of the things that I find interesting is that we do have the opportunity to not only provide access to capital, but we're also looking to provide training and services. And those training and services resources will be made available not just through the CDFIs, because some CDFIs will be able to offer some technical assistance in addition to access to capital, but through other nonprofits that help diverse entrepreneurs adapt and build their business. So the training focus is going to be on strengthening the business model and business planning, marketing, supply chain management or supplier diversity, budgeting, and more. So that's the second aspect or second phase of this Open for Business Fund. The third phase of the Open for Business Fund is going to be around recovery and resiliency. So there will be grants that are provided to stimulate longer term small business economic development, and also to focus some on policy reforms that are going to be necessary to support these small businesses and to help them grow. And so when we look back at CDFIs once again, Megan, talk a little bit more about the evolution of the platform and why it's so important that we focused on CDFIs to move this strategy forward.
Happy to, Gigi, thank you. So the CDFI industry has been around for more than 40 years. As you can imagine, it's grown quite a bit over that time. And you're right, there's a whole part of this financial ecosystem that includes technical assistance providers as well as lenders. So CDFIs often do both. They lend and they provide technical assistance. And that's really what we tend to think of as their secret sauce. But there are also organizations that are focused on technical assistance specifically, and they will be invited to apply for another round of funding within the Open for Business Fund. In addition to the first round that went specifically to CDFIs to focus on their lending and expanding their lending. The way CDFIs are structured is they try to build up an equity base from grants and then raise debt capital on top of that to expand the pool of capital that they're able to use to lend. But that equity piece is really critical to keeping them alive and afloat and helping them absorb any loan losses and of course covering operating costs. And the more equity you have, of course, the larger you can grow, the more debt you can raise as well. So this commitment from Wells and the Open for Business Fund is really critical capital because it is in the form of a grant. And so it will come in as equity. It's also very flexible. CDFIs can use it to build their lending pool, but they can also use it for other operating costs, such as covering the costs of providing that critical technical assistance, which is especially important right now during the COVID recovery phase when businesses have to adapt and figure out how to perhaps modify their business plan to fit with the changing times that we're going through. So we're trying to get at all pieces of this really critical piece of the ecosystem that is an expansion, I would say, and kind of a sister or cousin to a bank like Wells. CDFIs are really reaching deep into communities. They're community-based, they're place-based. They understand what their communities need, and they are really financial first responders, they've been referred to in times like this in particular. They're always there, but they were there after the Great Recession, and their performance was excellent, better than mainstream banks, and they're there now. And they're there after natural disasters. They really are critical pieces, again, of that financial ecosystem, and that's why we're so pleased to be able to support them with this incredible level of grant capital. And I'll just add that it really complements what my team focuses on and what we've been doing for 20 years, which is providing some of that debt capital to CDFIs. So we make loans to CDFIs at flexible terms that they pool with other funding sources from other banks and foundations and individuals and religious institutions and corporations to build their pool of capital that they will put out into communities. And I would also add, Gigi, that while our conversation today is focused on small businesses, which is so critically important right now, I just want to make sure the audience is aware that CDFIs play in other spaces as well. They are real estate lenders as well, and may be funding affordable housing or grocery stores in a food desert, charter schools, health centers, childcare centers, all kinds of community facilities that are so important for communities. So again, it's a critical partner industry for us, and we're just thrilled to be able to get these resources out at this critical time.
Megan, thank you for offering that broader perspective on all of the great things that CDFIs do in the name of community development and enhancing communities where we live and work. I would also say that I think it's pretty awesome that the CDFI industry exists and is very engaged in making sure that we have affordable homes, that we do have community centers, all of the things that we look at when we see a new development come to bear. The CDFI industry, I've witnessed them taking a lead on making sure that there's the holistic view of what a community ought to be and what kind of resources need to be placed in communities as those dollars are being brought to bear. One of the questions that I think our audience would probably have is, what we think the impact of this Open for Business Fund is ultimately going to be. And I wanted to just offer that we are expecting to reach thousands of diverse small businesses to help them stay open and sustain thousands of jobs across the country. So we're looking at not only the business sustainability, but job creation and job sustainability. We're working with each one of our grantees to track the impact. So oftentimes, as a significant funder, we are asked by our constituents and our stakeholders, so what happened? And in this particular instance, and in most instances, we do like to see impact and outcomes, and we are going to be tracking and measuring to make sure that happens. So rest assured, I would say to the participating audience, be on the lookout and listen up for how this work is evolving and how it is going to be impacting the communities where we all live and work. I'd also say that from a CDFI perspective, Megan, I've heard about how CDFIs usually double or triple their impact because of the philanthropic support that comes together with the lending. And you mentioned that just a few moments ago. I would want you to just talk a little bit about what the process was for the CDFIs to apply and what that looks like right now. We realize that the window for CDFIs to apply for the first tranche or first phase of this Open for Business Fund, I think it ended in mid-August. Is that right, Megan?
That's right, Gigi. And you're right, we had a lot of response. I want to say probably double what we have available. But that doesn't mean we won't be able to reach a lot of those organizations. I did want to point out that this program really builds on a program that we started in 2015 called Diverse Community Capital, which was initially a $175 million commitment to support CDFIs that are lending to diverse-owned small businesses. And so we're continuing that theme with the Open for Business Fund because that is where the critical need is. We're also focused all along on CDFIs that are led by diverse leaders. So we're really trying to help expand the field that way as well. I hope that the application was not too onerous, but we did ask folks to describe how they're reaching businesses, and in particular diverse businesses, during this crisis. You know, what kind of outreach do they do? What kind of lending products do they have? What kind of technical assistance tools do they have? And then also some detail on how they would use the funds. You know, how much do they think they need, and what are they going to use it for? And again, as I mentioned, the uses of the grant funds are quite flexible, but we're looking for well thought out plans that, as you said, we think will create some significant impact. And I can add that through the course of the DCC program since 2015, we've reached about 90 CDFIs. We are pretty close to reaching that $175 million commitment, which was a mix of grant funds and debt capital from my team. And that has helped save or create close to 200,000 jobs that are created by the loans made to the small businesses. So it's an interesting process to count the impact, because of course we're supporting the CDFIs, and then the CDFIs are supporting the businesses. But we're looking at numbers and we're looking at stories. I was in touch with one of our groups in New York City who's been busy lending during this COVID crisis, and they had a terrific story about an organization that they were able to support with a small loan so that they could pivot their activity and start making masks to help folks get through this crisis. It was an organization that was already in the textile business, and they were able to, again, modify their business plan with a loan from the CDFI and keep going, and also obviously supply the community with that much needed material during this crisis. So it's a combination of the statistics and the stories, and it's just such a committed industry with terrific people staffing the CDFIs, and then of course terrific people running these businesses that are getting supported and helping each other get through this really difficult time.
That's outstanding. You know, one of the questions that we received when we had our partner meeting with the NAACP, all of the economic development chairs who work directly with national headquarters of the NAACP on programs that we fund, was, can small businesses directly get grants and contributions from this fund? That was one of the big questions that we got. And of course, the answer to that is that no, the small businesses would not necessarily come directly to Wells Fargo for the grants, that those funds are being made available through these CDFIs, which is why I thought today, Megan, it was really important for us to get together and talk about the CDFI trade, what CDFIs are, how they've evolved over time in the United States as a viable platform for community development and community development finance, and how we partner very closely as a major banking and financial services institution to invest in these CDFIs, to make grants to these CDFIs, and to partner with CDFIs to reach the small and minority-owned businesses and other communities, low and moderate income communities, for affordable housing inventory, and some of the other things that you so eloquently explained earlier, access to funding for charter schools, for all types of community development-oriented resources across the United States. So again, Megan, thank you for that wonderful explanation of the CDFI trade. Thank you for joining me in this conversation about the Open for Business Fund. A couple of things that might come to mind for our listeners are, number one, you know, how do you as Wells Fargo define what a diverse small business is? And I want to make sure that our audience knows that we want to intentionally, at Wells Fargo, we want to intentionally reach small business owners most impacted by COVID-19 with this Open for Business Fund. We plan to emphasize Black, African American, Latino, Asian American, and Native American owned small businesses. This does not exclude other diverse groups, but we're emphasizing racially and ethnically diverse small business owners given the data around their closure rates and revenue challenges in the midst of this pandemic and our current environment. And beyond this Open for Business Fund, I just wanted to let the audience know that there are other ways Wells Fargo has supported small business. As part of the relief through our Wells Fargo Foundation, we've awarded over 400 grants to nonprofits that serve small businesses. And those grants total more than $25 million. And we've done that since March of 2020. The grants are supporting state and city small business relief funds. There have been cash assistance and payment relief from community development finance institutions that we just talked about, in addition to over and above the Open for Business Fund, and support services, and even more for struggling entrepreneurs across the United States. We know that we are all in this together, and our partnership with the NAACP is one great way that Wells Fargo is able to reach communities that are very important to all of us. What we would like for you to do as participants is stay in touch with us, listen out for these types of programs and the access to capital, the access to technical assistance, capacity building, and recovery and resiliency work that we'll be doing over time as we move through this pandemic and the effects of the pandemic. And finally, policy. Policy is very important for small business, and policy is very important for all the things that we do. As a person who works in our Government Relations and Public Policy Division at Wells Fargo, it gives me great pride to know that as a company, we're standing with our partners and our friends, and we're trying to drive for the types of policies that help our business maintain the ability to serve and to be impactful for our customers and our communities. And so finally, Megan, we are rounding out of our time. We have 20 minutes for this conversation, and I just wanted to give you a moment to have closing comments before I close out.
Well, Gigi, thank you again so much. It's really been a pleasure to talk with you today and to virtually be part of the convention. You know, I think the story that sticks with me through this time is talking to some of our customers, so some of the CDFIs who were working literally 20-hour days in the early days of the PPP program to get some of those loans out the door. And I heard from many of them that despite being so tired, they actually felt exhilarated. That was the word they used, to be part of the system that was helping get these emergency funds to small businesses. These are folks who are just so committed to the work of their CDFIs and committed to the work of supporting their customers. So even through that fatigue, they just felt great about being able to be part of the solution. And I know that that extends to us as funders of the CDFIs. We feel absolutely the same way. Just thrilled that we can help support this critical ecosystem, both with the grant capital we've been talking about at the Open for Business Fund and our Diverse Community Capital Program, and then through the debt capital that comes out of my team that really complements that grant capital. We've been doing this for 20 years and we expect to be doing it for another 20 more. And we're just thrilled to see that the CDFI industry is getting the attention that it's due, and that they are recognized as being such an important part of the financial system, especially during a time like this. So thank you, Gigi, so much.
Thank you, Megan. And as we close our session, I just wanted to say thank you, all of the participants, for joining this brief discussion. There's a lot more that we could talk about. There are very exciting things happening in the wake of the COVID pandemic. We have awakened as a nation. We're aware of what's going on around us, and we are more acutely aware of the disproportionate impact on Black and Brown communities. And so with that, we have an opportunity to stand up and stand up and make sure that we address issues and opportunities around justice and equality. And with Wells Fargo, we are committed to diversity and inclusion. So we're with you. We stand with you. We've been with you, and we appreciate each and every one of you for joining us today.
Good evening, fellow delegates and alternates. My name is Hazel Dukes. I'm chair of the National Nominating Committee. I will be presenting rules for persons who would like to be elected to the board of directors. The deadline to receive consent forms for a candidate to the National Board of Directors at the National Convention will be September the 18th by email at ballot@naacpnet.org no later than 10 a.m. For candidates wishing to make speeches, the official nominating speech reservation form must be submitted to the chairman of the election supervisory via email at ballot@naacpnet.org no later than 10 a.m. on Monday, September the 21st, 2020. Nominating speeches will be no more than 3 minutes each and no more than 1 seconding speech of 1 minute. These videos should be sent with the complete nomination speech reservation form and submitted via email at ballot@naacpnet.org no later than 10 a.m. on Monday, September the 21st, 2020. Only a certified voting delegate to the National Convention may place an individual name in nomination or second a nomination. Qualification: NAACP Constitution, Article 4, Section 3. Any member in good standing of the association who has been a bona fide member for at least 180 calendar days prior to the date nominations are made, and who has not been an employee of the association or any of its units during the 2-year period prior to the date nominations are made, and is affiliated with a local unit, shall be eligible to be nominated, elected, and serve on the board of directors. Consent forms may be requested by email at ballot@naacpnet.org by submitting a request for consent to the Election Supervisory Committee. Consent forms may be requested from the Election Supervisory Committee by email at ballot@naacpnet.org. Following the chairman's address on the opening session of the convention on Sunday, September 13th, 2020, to be considered by the committee. All consent forms must be submitted no later than 10 a.m. on the Monday, September the 21st, 2020 deadline. Election Supervisory Committee receive consent forms and petitions. Email at ballot@naacpnet.org. Voting shall be conducted by secret ballot before the annual resolution session. Voting will commence on Saturday, September the 26th. All voting delegates to the convention are eligible to vote and will be authenticated through the process assigned for registered delegates. The nominee who wins 50% plus one of the ballot cast will be declared the winner. Any voter needing assistance will be assisted by a member of the Election Supervisory Committee or designee.
Hi, I'm Boston Mayor Marty Walsh. Welcome to the 111th NAACP National Convention. Boston was honored to be selected as the host city of the National Convention this year. Accepting that invitation was one of my proudest moments as mayor, and it was a proud moment for Boston. Our city is ready to serve on a national stage for some of the most important conversations in the ongoing fight for justice and equality. Of course, the COVID-19 pandemic changed our plans. Shifting the conversations online was a hard decision, but it was the right thing to do. I thank the NAACP for their partnership in protecting the health and safety of our communities as our nation works through this difficult time. In 2020, the mission of the NAACP is urgent as ever. The theme of this year's convention is "We're Done Dying." I stand with you to demand an end to police brutality and all forms of systemic racism. In Boston, we're answering the call for justice from local Black communities and from all across the Commonwealth and the country. This summer, we declared racism a public health crisis. We introduced immediate reforms to the Boston Police Department's use of force and training policies. We reallocated funds from the police overtime budget into youth programs, mental health supports, food and housing security programs, and other community resources. And we recommit ourselves to addressing the impacts of systemic racism in everything we do as a city. This is just the beginning of the work that we must and will do together. The pandemic and the events of this past year have made it clear that we cannot go back to an old normal. Now is the time to create a new, more equitable, and more just society together. In Boston, we take that responsibility seriously. We are committed to upholding the values of civil rights and social justice, and we proudly support the NAACP. We're also proud that Boston will host the 114th NAACP National Convention in 2023. This will be an opportunity to build on the progress our city has made, to focus on the work left to be done, and to highlight the Black excellence here in Boston's neighborhoods. It will also be an opportunity to highlight the historic Boston branch of the NAACP, which is the first chartered branch dating back to 1911. There is an urgent need for all Americans to support their local branches. Change begins at the local level, and it's an excellent way to support our communities. Local action and civic engagement will be a focus of this year's virtual convention. So will criminal justice reform and making your vote count. I look forward to hearing from the voices of experience in the Black community and from the leaders of the NAACP and from our youth. And I look forward to an important conversation about the next steps we must take. Thank you all for being part of this historic event. And thank you for the work you do in our communities each and every day.
The American dream. It wasn't made for everybody. It forgot about one very important detail: Black America. It's why this land of equal opportunity was built on the backs and genius of Black people. And why Black success isn't always a story of accomplishment, but a story of getting out. But Black Americans woke up a long time ago and set out to make their own dream. They had to. We've seen it in Atlanta, the city we call home, and communities all around America. Black dreams matter. Black voices matter. Black lives matter. Black America's dream is the real American dream because it means everyone has a chance to succeed.
Good evening, Youth and College Division. Welcome to Youth Night. I hope you all have been enjoying the convention so far. I'm Helen Myers, and I serve as the Youth Vice Chair of the Convention Planning Committee on the National Board of Directors. I'm so glad you all were able to join our conversation this evening. We have a lot in store for you tonight, such as our incredible guest speaker, who is an NBA athlete, and a thought-provoking panel addressing COVID-19, police brutality, and the election from members of the Youth and College Division from across the nation. Before we begin, I must pause to introduce our chair of the National Youth Works Committee, a woman I have worked very closely with for the past 2 years and admire so much, Kyra Mitchell.
Hey, Youth in College. My name is Kyra Mitchell, and I am the chair of the National Youth Work Committee. Even though this convention isn't the convention we thought we would be having, or during the time we would, I'm still happy that we have this opportunity to meet together in this virtual setting. I'm excited to see what the next few weeks will bring and to see what the rest of this panel will have for us. We have gone through so much in this past year with COVID, police brutality, and so many other things, but that just shows how much stronger we are, not only as Black people, but as young Black people. So let's make sure we keep the same energy and momentum and turn out and get people to turn out to the polls in November.
Tonight, we have the pleasure of being welcomed with a very special guest. Admiral Schofield is a native of London, England. He was selected in the second round of the 2019 NBA draft, 42nd overall by the Philadelphia 76ers, but ended up being traded to the Washington Wizards. He is an alumnus of the University of Tennessee at Knoxville, where he majored in African Studies and played college basketball for 4 years. At UT, he won such honors as AP All-America Honorable Mention and All-SEC First and Second Team. When playing in this year's NBA's exhibition games at the Walt Disney World Resort in Orlando, Florida, he chose to play with the word enough on the back of his jersey. He said, "I chose enough on the back of my jersey because it's time for people to be more aware. Black lives matter to me because I'm a Black man in America. I'm a British American. One of the things I've experienced in this country is pure racism, systemic racism, and it has to stop. So enough is enough." Please join me in welcoming Admiral Schofield.
Hey, everybody, welcome to this really special keynote. We are going to be doing a fireside chat with Admiral Schofield of the Wizards, which is really, really exciting. So just to kind of frame this up for you, we get to invite a lot of really incredible people who get to come and talk to you about how they're working with different organizations and working within their own world on social change and social justice. And man, first of all, Admiral, welcome, man. Thank you so much for making the time. Just so amazing. Always get the opportunity to talk to you.
No, thank you. I just really appreciate the opportunity for the NAACP for having me to speak to the Youth and College Division. It's a great opportunity, and just sessions like these are some of the sessions that I would have appreciated growing up. But being in this setting, I'm just appreciative to be the one to speak and drop some knowledge. Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of growing up, man, for people that don't know, obviously they've seen you, out on the basketball court with the Wizards. Maybe they caught you at University of Tennessee when you were, all SEC and all those great accolades. But what do people not know about you, man? Can you tell us a little bit about where you're from, kind of how you got to this point? Yeah, so, a little bit about me. My name is Admiral Schofield. I was actually born in London, England. My father served in the military for 24 years, the Navy branch. And we moved over here to the U.S. about a year and a half after I was born. And I grew up outside of Chicago, loving the Bulls, loving Michael Jordan, loving basketball, growing up watching Michael Jordan. And my dad really instilled in me hard work, and just that hard work and that work ethic to persevere no matter what the circumstance is, understanding, discipline, understanding, integrity, understanding the core values that he taught in the household, and not only to just be a person of high character, but to be able to be an example for people. Is one of the things that my dad taught me. So growing up, I just always focused on what was important to me. I was just taught to prioritize. I was taught to, understand that there's a time and a place for things, and also understand the people around me and understand the circumstances around me and how to be successful in them. My dad always just taught me respect, and being responsible will always, bring forth opportunities, but also it'll make people want to work with you. So I always, tried to keep that within the sport and be respectful and hardworking, and it's worked out for me. I was able to get a scholarship to the University of Tennessee, and now here I am in the NBA playing for the Washington Wizards. Man, that's amazing. It's really funny. I follow you on Instagram and other social media, and I know that if you weren't a full-time basketball player, it seems like you'd be a full-time activist and somebody who really cares about these social issues. So tell me this really quick, because I think a lot of people really write off your generation. You're 23 years old. You've got an amazing platform. You're, by all means, a sports star in that space.
how do you currently use it, or what drives you to want to be such an activist in this space? And then how are you leveraging your platform for social issues?
I think the biggest thing is understanding that people aren't as aware as we think, and bringing more awareness and getting the word out there, the facts out there, and educating people on the social justice issues is very important. So I just think that with my platform, it's important to get the information out there. Also, the stories of the people, the victims of the people who are not only, affected by police brutality, but racism in itself in our community. So for me, it's just one, getting people more aware and letting them know that one, there is a problem. Two, educating them on the problem. And three, helping them understand, well, one, this isn't right. How can we fix it? Creating that change. And, for me, when I talk about change, I don't think of, just throwing $100 million into something because, I just feel like the money's going to make its route. I'm talking about small changes, small conversations, leading to putting you in front of people that make big decisions.
That's
and
good.
Then that leads to, a chain reaction of different changes. So I think minority change, small change is big change. So for me, it's just creating a little change by educating and getting people more aware.
That's really wonderful, man. It's really crazy because with these platforms comes an amazing responsibility. And I think that, as we start to see more and more young people have this amazing reach, because if it's not Instagram, it's TikTok. If it's not TikTok, then it's going to be YouTube. And people are starting to amass these big followings like yourself. And what would be your advice to some of these people out here? Because think about it, there are thousands of young people, thousands of people who want to facilitate change that actually have a platform or they're building one. So what would be your advice to them during this time? Like what should they be focusing on, and what are some of the advice that you would give them?
Well, if I was in your shoes right now, the advice I probably would want to hear is, well, voting is very important. For those who are eligible to vote, those who are eligible to vote and registered to vote, those who aren't registered, please register. Voting is that small change that I talk about. That's the way to get your voice heard. And it's funny that we're talking about that because, me and my partners were actually creating a platform to amplify voices, but also keep this conversation going, which is actually great for what we're trying to do and what we're talking about here on this platform. And what we're talking about here is just taking what we have, right? Our social media platforms, our everyday lives, the people we encounter, we interact with, and just adding in a small piece of education, a small piece of awareness, bringing something to someone's attention that they may not have, been aware of. Those changes are going to help. It's going to make people more aware. It's going to make people more curious. It's going to make people want to reach out and get more information. And luckily for us, we're creating a platform where we'll be able to feed that information, but also amplify the voices that are creating that small change. So my call to action will also be vote, sign up for your local NAACP chapters, and go out and educate yourselves, but also bring awareness to other people. And by doing that, you're going to create that small change. And you have to realize by creating that small change, big change is inevitable. It's the small changes throughout the process is what's going to create the big change. If we cheat the process of change, we won't receive and reap the blessings of the change that we want. So we have to, every day, every chance we get, every post we get, anytime that we feel that something's important to us, we must make people aware that, hey, this is an issue. This is an issue to our community. This is an issue to our society. So it's just something that I feel for you and for me, if I was in your shoes, I would say, whatever I can do, I would want to learn as much as I can, not only about what's going on, but about my history, my people, and how I can be effective by just what I do every day. Not trying to get outside of my box, but operating within my own box so that your box can fit with my box and we can keep building. You see what I'm saying? It's just a concept of staying where you are, but doing as much as you can. And that's powerful. That's greatness. And I think with that, the youth can really make an impact.
That's fantastic, because you know what's really interesting about that is when you amplify voices, that is small incremental change. It's actually bringing awareness to things that people aren't going to necessarily get in the mainstream media. And I'm so happy that you actually and your partners are creating this new, I'm assuming it's a channel, being able to get and elevate voices. But one thing that I will say, and maybe this is how we'll kind of end it, the last big piece of advice that I would love for you to give all of our viewers here is this. You probably are met with some hostility. You probably met with some friction about what you share, and you're not always getting green lights and high fives from people. Tell me how you deal with the people that hate on this, the people that might come up against you or as an adversary in this conversation. Give people some wisdom on how to deal with those folks.
Well, with those type of interactions, I feel more powerful in those situations than ever because I know who I am. So when it comes to the situation at hand, if I know the facts, I can go in full-fledged, ready to battle without it becoming emotional for me, without it becoming personal for me. It's just fact-driven and direct. I think when we don't know much about things and when we're ignorant to the subject we're speaking on, we start to, by the weakness of us not knowing the facts, we start to get emotionally involved, get stressed, get frustrated, and then we don't get anywhere with the conversation. So I think it's just important to educate yourself. The more you know, the less you can be, belittled with or swindled with, in a sense. And that's just the beauty of it. I think that's where it comes from. But I think the main focus is just understanding that not everybody is going to see it the way you see it or the way you're telling it. The biggest thing that you have to understand is it's just always speaking it, because the more you speak it, the better chance you give yourself for it happening. You see, power is in the tongue, power is in your words. So if you speak down on something, if you speak death on something, death will proceed. If you speak life on something, life will breathe. And I just think, for me, the more positive you are and understanding and being real with yourself, that I'm not going to change the world in one day. I'm not going to change every person in one day. And there are going to be people that push against my philosophy, my idea, my concerns, my feelings. But guess what? If I feel that it's right, it's okay to get in some good trouble. It's okay to get some good trouble. So I think that, it's just about educating yourself.
Man, I appreciate that. So for everybody listening right now, I hope what you heard was from somebody who is at one of the biggest, most famous leagues in the world, who has not only created a name for himself there, but also in the social justice arena, is that, man, we need to start thinking about small incremental changes. We need to start elevating the right voices, and we need to be educated. We need to make sure that we know what we're talking about, because the only thing that will ever terminate ignorance is education. And I'm really excited, man. Hey, so real quick before we leave and before we kind of wrap this up, how can people follow you, stay a part of the conversation? How are people going to stay in touch with you after this interview?
Yeah, so like I told you before, we're creating a platform, the channel that we talked about, and your support is greatly appreciated. You can follow me on Twitter at Admiral Elite 15 and on Instagram at uncle_SCHO on Instagram. So you can follow me. I appreciate it. We would love your support, and go Wiz.
Hey, and first of all, man, thank you so much again. Obviously, this is amazing. And we'll be sure to follow you along your entire season next year, but enjoy your off season. Always a pleasure to talk to you, brother. Have a good one. Thank you so much.
So now, to kick off our Youth in College panel this evening, I want to introduce you to our moderator. The moderator tonight is Ty Barber Gums from Overland Park, Kansas. In 2019, Ty graduated from Johns Hopkins University with 2 bachelor degrees in both public health and French. While at Hopkins, she studied abroad for a year in Dakar, Senegal. She entered at SAMU Social Senegal and worked with children and adolescents living on Dakar's streets. After returning from Senegal, she completed her public health honors thesis by conducting a diabetes study in Baltimore. She looked at the effectiveness of an app in helping African Americans better manage their diabetes. Post-graduation, she taught English in France, where she educated the French about African Americans. Please join me in welcoming Ty Barber-Gomes.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ty, and I will be the moderator for tonight's panel. I am from the Johnson County Youth Council chapter in Kansas in Region 4. I will give each panelist a moment to introduce themselves.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kelsey Marie Pirine. I am the chapter president from the Southern University chapter of NAACP by way of Mobile, Alabama.
Hello, everyone. My name is Francesca Mitchell. I am from the great Region 5. I serve as the Marion County Youth Council President and State Secretary of the Florida State Youth and College Division.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Amon Toon. I currently serve as the Virginia State Conference Youth and College Division President from Region 7, and I'm happy to be here with you all.
And I am Matthew White. I am from Louisville, Kentucky, Region 3.
So question number 1 is, how did you organize voter registration during the uprisings while also dealing with the uncertainty that the coronavirus pandemic presented? And we'll start with Kelsey.
So I believe that the way that we kind of, that the Southern University chapter is planning on using the political power that we've been seeing in the streets and taking it to the ballot box is by saying it just like that. So we've been marching in the streets. We've been seeing these uprisings that's taking place around the country. And we want to take that, and we want to take that bravery that they had, that they were standing out there, and that power, and we want to take it to the ballot box. We want to make sure that not only are we registered, but that we're educated and that we're going into the ballot box knowing exactly what's on there, every down ballot race that's on there, every constitutional amendment, not just those races that's going to be at the very tip top of the ballot, such as the presidential and vice presidential ballots and races. So we want to make sure that not only do they realize that they know they're going to be protected, so making sure that we're providing PPE to our voters, so masks, hand sanitizer, when they're going in, we want to make sure that they know that they are educated and have the wherewithal to be able to cast the ballot that they want to cast.
Matthew, would you care to share your thoughts?
Yeah, so in Kentucky, we have been the hub for everything Breonna Taylor related. So in that, there's been a lot of marching, a lot of different activism activities that have happened outside. And in that, we've been, integrating ourselves into that. So we've honed in on that opportunity by like going out while marches are going on and handing out, PPE, handing out voter registration cards. We've attempted to get like some iPads and stuff so that we can like actually register people. Now that Kentucky has allowed us to electronically register people to vote, that's been a wonderful thing for us to do. But in all of that, I think like specifically for Kentucky, we have had a lot of COVID outbreaks. We've had a lot of cases in Kentucky, and we've been extremely cautious and careful about how we do things. So in that, it's just making sure that we're aware of the procedures and aware of the precautions and kind of aware of our environment. But we haven't allowed COVID-19 to stop us at all, because I think the voter registration is so important, especially for Kentucky. I know back in June when we were having our election, there was a big push on All Eyes on Kentucky. I don't think that moment should have changed at all. We still want Mitch out, and that's still our highest priority. So just kind of thinking about that and focusing on that and reminding our people of like that we need to get Mitch out, and it's time for us to get Trump out as well.
Amon, so what are your thoughts on the voter registration during the pandemic?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that question. So I think that voter registration, much like Matthew and Kelsey said, is actually one of the most important things in order to just progress and move forward in making sure that we can get a win in November. We're kind of in this unprecedented time where we have to figure out different ways to register people to vote. while being socially distant, virtually, and things of that nature. And so what we've been doing in Virginia is utilizing vote.org and our links in order to send out the voter registration links in that way. Sending it out to our friends, having our friends send it out to their friends, just to ensure that we are getting the numbers that we want in Virginia in terms of increasing voter registration. And especially in this time of the Black Lives Matter movement, and of making sure that we can see and progress America in the way that we need to, that in order to do that, we have to register our folks to vote, right? And so, like I said, we're doing that through using our links. We're doing that through having live events on Instagram, having panel discussions through Zoom, having really serious and heart-to-heart conversations about what people's thoughts are about this election season, right? Because everybody has like their thoughts and opinions, but we still need them to go out and vote regardless of how they feel. And so that's kind of where we're at right now, and just making sure that, yes, we are also educating, like what Kelsey said, yes, that we are mobilizing behind this vote and registering folks so that they can use their voice and their power in November.
My ideas on the voter registration for Florida, what we have done is completely doing virtual events every week, sometimes every month, to advertise or to get people to understand the voter registration process, on how to get yourself registered to vote through the Florida, the state initiative for the voter registration. And then we even train teens who are at least, older, younger than 18 years old, so they can get themselves pre-registered. For during the uprisings and stuff, with that whole news with Trump saying, downplaying the coronavirus, now we're even more cautious and more onto the social distancing and more onto the mask, and everyone trying to march is 6 feet apart. We're trying to do that square for everyone so that everyone is safe, everyone is protected, and there is no risk for the coronavirus.
So now moving on to question number 2. Over the next 4 years, what do you think will be the most important for young Black voters?
A lot of our focus should be on the 4 main points of ensuring that we continue to get our voting rights and continuing to make sure that this is a democratic nation. 2, making sure that education continues to get funded and not defunded. And then 3, reining in on police control, and ensuring that this is a community police state and not just a police state, because as we all know, the history of police is from slave police. And then 4th, I think overall we need to really focus in on public health. Last time, we took health as like a joke, and now we're realizing that health is serious, because now everybody's scared of COVID. So I think that we really need to focus in on health and making sure that, we have accessible doctor's offices, accessible insurance. And I know Obamacare did a lot for insurance, but we need to continue to push for getting insured. A lot of Black people are not insured, and making sure that we get our health together. So thinking about high blood pressure, thinking about asthma, thinking about our weight and obesity. That's a high common thing in African American culture, and we need to take care of that. So we need to focus in on those 4 things.
No, yes, I agree with you completely. I got my degree in public health, and everything you said is so true. And there's so many people of color who are not insured or underinsured, and that's really going to affect our populations now and over the next 4 years, most definitely. Francesca, would you like to state your opinion?
I completely agree with Matthew. I think over the next 4 years, civil rights organizations such as the NAACP, I believe is going to the work is going to be like you're on steroids. There's so much to be done and so much needs and issues that need to be corrected. And so, like with past work that we didn't get to do, such as health, we're gonna try to get that. We gotta try to get that work done. And then if there's new work that's gonna be brought up, such as like people who are living in these rural areas, because to be honest, when it came to the 2016 election, with the whole like for Florida, I thought like with the normal big cities would usually overtake the whole would be the decision for the vote. However, it was the people that were living in the rural areas such as Ocala that took over those votes. So our initiatives on targeting the major cities should is going to be changed because of those rural areas in our country also have a big impact on the election. So those changes are going to be made over the 4 years, over the next 4 years. And at this time, the NAACP should really go steroids, like on activism, whether virtually or in person with social distancing, and really get the work done and try to maneuver the technology that we have and have control with. So that's just my take on the idea, and I love that idea, man.
I completely agree with what Matthew and Francesca said, to the point where I think we can't stress enough, I think, how important education is going to be within the next 4 years, how important healthcare is going to be within the next 4 years, especially for Black people and people of color with coronavirus and with schools going virtual and with schools half being in person or with schools maybe being in person, right? We are witnessing that the achievement gap is going to get wider, right? And I think that's just something that we all have to come to terms with. And because of that, we have to, within these next 4 years and 5 years and so forth, we have to make sure that we are doing the work in order to ensure, okay, how are we going to close this gap? What are we going to do to make sure that, okay, this family that doesn't necessarily have the access, which is also another thing that's going to be important within the next 4 years. I think the general consensus is access. Like, we need access to healthcare and access to education. We need to be able to get to that voting poll. We need to be able to get to that school. If I'm sick, I don't want to have to drive 20 miles to my doctor's office. I want to be able to go 5 minutes down the road, right? But back to the education aspect, we just are going to have to figure out how and what ways can we close this achievement gap. And I know in previous years, it has been the topic of conversation, and it's been something that, we've touched on, but I do truly believe that after, I guess, post-COVID, that this is going to be something that we seriously have to push for, because education is really the pillar. Like, we have to start, education is the foundation. We can't do much if we are not educated. And we are already seeing that our schools have less, right? Our schools don't have the proper textbooks. We don't have all of the right teachers. We don't have the access that we need in order to ensure that we are providing the kind of education to our kids, to whoever, to ensure that they can do what needs to be done next. And so within these next 4 years, I do believe that it's going to be education, access, healthcare, and also with what Matthew said, police reform, right? The defundment of the police. What does that look like? Taking those funds and putting it into education and putting it into healthcare so that we can have that access. And so those are just some of the issues that I do think over these next 4 years we will definitely be have to address, have to look at, have to have those conversations, even if they make us uncomfortable, in order for us to progress and move forward.
I'm gonna have to piggyback off of what everybody else said. I think it's gonna have a lot to do with access, and I mean access across every single institution that makes this country, because we have seen, especially right now during this COVID time, that Black people are at the bottom in their eyes, that we are not granted anything. And it is even more apparent that this is a Black and white issue. Is really as simple as that. We are not given the justice across the institutions that make up this country. And that's just simple. Education, the criminal justice system, healthcare. I mean, we are literally at the top of not receiving anything from anybody. And I believe that this generation of young Black voters that's going to be going in is going to be looking to our politicians, to our elected officials on the local, state, and federal level to put in the action behind the things that we have been screaming and yelling and fighting about. So I think that that's going to be something that we're going to, like, student loan debt, that is something that the NAACP is working really hard on. But I believe that is something that, because we didn't see any help in the stimulus packages, the one little stimulus package that we did receive, and it's not just something that's just affecting us, but it's showing how it's affecting us across every single aspect of this country, how to buy a house, to get a car, to go to another school, to get a job, that we are suffering. And I believe that that's going to be the issue, is that we no longer want to suffer, and we're not going to tolerate it anymore. We're asking for it in the classroom. We're going to be asking for it at our jobs. We're going to be asking for it at City Hall, at courtrooms. We're no longer going to be tolerating people taking what we say and just pushing it to the side. And I believe that's going to be the main push in this voters, is that we want action. We want accountability, and we'll take you out when it's time for you to be taken out.
Wow. Okay. Wow. You all gave amazing answers to this question. Everything you guys talked about, from education to police reform to public health, those are all important issues. And those are all issues that should be addressed, because the Black voting bloc is very important, particularly Black females. So I can see a lot of change in these next few years. Okay, so moving on to question 3. How can those younger than 18 still be a dominant force in the midst of this election season?
I'm not 17 anymore, or younger than 18 anymore, I guess. But at 21, you still face the same issues, okay? So it doesn't necessarily, I guess, go away, because, like you said, you have to command that respect. You have to know your stuff. You have to educate yourself. And I think that for those who are 18 and younger, we've seen, I mean, the March for Our Lives was run by, it wasn't by a 45-year-old adult. It was not by a 20-year-old. It was not by a 30-year-old. It was by teenagers. Like, teenagers were like, we are sick of this. And they went out and they marched. My brother at the time was still in high school. He was like, Mom, you might be mad, but I'm leaving school and I'm going to the march. And she was like, go. Like, because it's important that at this age, at this time in your life, you kind of figure out, okay, what am I passionate about? How am I going to be a change? How am I going to be that catalyst to ensure that this does not happen to anybody else coming after me, even at 15, 14, 13, 12, doesn't matter. There was a video that went viral of, I believe, a 5-year-old who was marching in the Black Lives Matter movement protest. And she was, with conviction in her voice, she was saying, stop shooting us and stop killing us, with conviction in her voice, okay? Because she means it. And if she can understand that at 5, then from 5 to however old you are, you can fight, and you have a voice, and you can use that voice in your high school, in your middle school, in elementary school. My mom was taking us to marches when we were in baby carriages. Like, she was like, y'all gonna come to this march, and y'all gonna figure out what you are passionate about and what you're going to fight for. Because if you stand for nothing, you will fall for anything. You will allow anybody to tell you what the policies should be. And we don't want that. And that's what is so amazing about Generation Z, about millennials, is that we are not allowing people to just tell us this is how it's going to be. We're like, Okay, cute. Now I'm going to let you know that you work for me, and this is how the policy is going to go. And this is what you need to change. And that's why I was just so passionate and loved what you were saying, Francesca, because it truly is so important that, you know, we're not shutting down youth voices. That is detrimental to the movement. We can't shut down youth voices just because it was done a certain way however many years ago, right? We learn, that's why it's important to educate ourselves, right? So we can learn from the civil rights movement. We can learn from our ancestors. We can learn from reading books and what they have to say to us on how to organize and things like that, right? So that we can continue to progress and move forward. And so I believe that there's truly so much, even in this moment, that those who are 18 and younger can do, which is, like Francesca said, you can educate yourself and then tell your friends, like, hey, I just read this really amazing article or book, whatever the case is, and I think you guys should read it too. Let's pre-register together. Let's figure out, we all turn, if you're 17, if you're even 16, 15, whatever it is, you can make little fun voter plans. You can help out with helping people make voter plans. You can help your family and make sure, like, hey, did you guys register to vote? Just want to make sure. And I think that I'm a little bit passionate about this as well, just because when I turned 18 after a major election, right? And so I was just upset that I couldn't vote in that election, but I was still able to do the work. I was still able to ensure that my friends who could vote, right, had the information that they needed. And so that is why it's so important that not only of our youth and our teenagers doing this work, but also encouraging them and letting them know, like, you do have a say, you do have a voice, even in this moment, even in this time, to speak up and utilize whatever you're passionate about in order to move this country forward.
I think it's very important that we recognize the fact that young voices has been the front of every movement since the beginning of time. I mean, since the beginning of the NAACP, really, that youth voices have been the people who have been on the front lines. And just like you said, the March for Our Lives movement, when it comes to gun control, climate change, young people younger than me, and I'm 21, who are suing their states because they're not doing what they're supposed to do when it comes to protecting our environment. And so we have to recognize that we are the dominant force, and we've always been the dominant force.
Back in the day, a lot of older folks were scared to participate in the civil rights movement because they didn't want to lose their jobs. So it was a lot of younger people who got out there and who fought. So yeah, we really are a powerful force.
I think all of you all have really just kind of honed in on this one thing that I think I can't let go. It's that as someone who's over the age of 21, we have to listen to the young folks. We failed to do that. And guess what? This is where we are. I mean, we have absolutely got to listen to what they have to say. We have to work for them. We have to vote for them. I think about, like, every time I go to the polls, I think about my kids. I think about every student that I have in a classroom. I think about every student that's in my building. And that's how I vote. I vote to make sure that they're okay, that they're taken care of, that whoever I'm voting for isn't gonna, mess them up for the next 4 years. So in that, I think firstly, we need to listen to them, but then I think we as adults have another responsibility. We have to take our kids to polls. We have to show them what the ballots look like. We have to really prepare them for voting. When I think back to when I was a little kid, my parents used to take me, and I say little, but I mean 13. My parents took me to the polls every year, every election. Probably weren't supposed to, but they took me in, they let me see the ballot. They showed me what a ballot actually looked like. And it was at 7 a.m. in the morning on an off day of school. So that taught me a whole nother lesson of the importance of voting as a whole. And I think we have to make sure as adults that we are teaching our kids that. But then as youth, we have to work. And this is one of those things that's a touchy point, but we have to get in there where we fit in. So one thing that I know is a lot of politicians look for volunteers who will go knock on doors, who will go, do the legwork for them. And one thing that I know is that whatever you do for somebody else will come back to you full term. So even if you go out there and you work and you're knocking on doors and you're sweating, guess what? It's gonna come back to you because they're gonna remember who you were. They're gonna say, hey, I need you to come in this room with me, have this conversation. How can we help you all? What can we do for you? So the other part is like, you gotta work the system. And then outside of that, I just think that we really have to be on the ground. We have to work, we have to do things that, are gonna get other people to the polls so that we can make sure that they vote for us.
So this would be our last question of the night. How has COVID-19 impacted Black youth, especially in regards to them going back to school? So this time we'll start with Aman.
Okay. Wow. So this question is super important because we have kind of already seen how education and COVID together is not a good mix. Just like you cannot put oil in water, or what is it, vinegar in water, whichever the case is, this is not working out well. And the impacts that this is going to have specifically for Black folks, for Black youth and people of color, are honestly detrimental. And it's a little unsettling to know that we have, well, I guess not we, but as a country, essentially, right, we have pushed for these children to go back to school without the proper resources. So we're pushing for them to go back and, they need an education is so important and all of this, but we can't give every single school in the country temperature checks. We can't give every school in the country and make sure that they all have shields. We can't make sure that every school in the country is properly socially distanced. We can't make sure that every single student in the country is not sick or doesn't have COVID, because you can get the test and then right after you leave, you could get COVID, right? And so I believe that the ways in which COVID-19 is impacting education is kind of like how I said before. One, the achievement gap, right? That is something that is very, very important that I believe we all need to continue to educate ourselves on, because it's shifting, especially now that with COVID and us having to go back to school, we're just kind of noticing like the lack. It's really exposing the underbelly of what's wrong with education, especially in public schools, charter schools. And so I believe that, there's a lot of work to be done in this area. And we kind of need to start now, just because in making sure that we can provide those resources. I know that there are families. I attend Alfred Street Baptist Church. And so what was so great about my church was that we provided like tablets essentially for families that have basically like one computer for 6 kids, because it doesn't make sense for basically teachers and school districts to assume that every single family has access to Wi-Fi and every single family has access to a laptop and every single family has access to, the same things that maybe we have access to. And so those are the kinds of steps that we need to be taking to ensure that we are doing what needs to be done with education and COVID-19, especially because post-COVID, I do believe that we are just going to see some very interesting numbers as it relates to the Black community and people of color and what that looks like for just us in general. And so that's my little spiel on that. And I look forward to hearing what everyone else has to say.
I have to piggyback again off of that achievement gap and the lack of resources. It is our schools in inner Black communities that don't have resources to survive, not just now in COVID, but pre-COVID and post-COVID is going to be even worse. So, and then if you think about it, they don't have the resources to adequately assist our children inside the classroom. Let's think about the cases that we've seen of students who are being disciplined over Zoom and being thrown in jail for not completing homework, and they had a learning disability. It's Black students who are going into these classrooms who are more prone to having learning disabilities such as dyslexia and ADHD, and they weren't being helped in the classroom. So how are we expecting them to shift to an online environment and not be even more confused or not be in even any more detriment that they were in the classroom. I'm a senior in college and I'm still struggling with online classes, and we've been in school for almost over a month now. And so how can I expect a second grader who is coming from a classroom where they didn't have books, the teacher is having to deal with disruptions and doesn't have the resources as a teacher to provide adequate services, and we're expecting them to stay focused online, or we're expecting a single mother or a single father who has 2 or 3 children and one computer and very not very strong Wi-Fi to help and assist and teach their children. We're asking parents, we're asking grandparents, we're asking sisters and brothers who are also in school to help teach Black youth, our youth, and then expecting them to come out on the other side untouched, ready to conquer the world and ready to conquer the next step of education. And we're not doing that before COVID. And so I believe that it's showing that the little crumbs that we have been left with for centuries and generations, and that it's showing that our administration they need to get it together. We have to figure out, even if it's coming together as a community, such as a church or as a school or whatever it may be, it really, now we're seeing the true definition of it takes a village to raise a child, because that is literally what we're doing right now. And while, yes, it's always been like that, it shouldn't be like that, because we should have the resources given from the people who are supposed to give it to us in order to make sure that we're producing and that that the education system is working how it should be working.
As a person who works in education, I get to see everything. So first of all, I think about the first part of the question, which is how has COVID-19 impacted Black youth? We already know that COVID-19 has disproportionately affected all of our Black people, but specifically our Black youth, not only because they have had to possibly been exposed to it, but they've also had possibly, had to help grandparents, aunts, uncles, mother, father, and help them through COVID. So we're already looking at like this double situation. And then on top of that, thinking about like when we're going back to school. So for those districts that are going back or have gone back, I know Indiana has like threatened to only fund 85% of the schools, or only 85% of their budget if they don't go back. In those situations, we're literally sending our Black children to their death. And not only are we sending our Black children to their death, we're sending their parents to their death. We're sending their cousins, aunts, uncles, grandparents, all of them. And here's why. COVID-19 is not contained just because we say wear a mask. COVID-19 is not contained just because we say keep 6 feet, which in all honesty, 6 feet is impossible in a classroom, even if we do minimize our class size. I know of classrooms that have had to have like 15 students in a classroom to make 3 feet work. So how 6 feet is gonna work when we continue to keep our classes at full capacity, it's impossible. Secondly, on the aspect of like actual education, because we haven't even made it there yet, one, when we think about our kids who are on IEPs, who are special ed, there's no possible way for them to receive all the modifications, everything that's written inside of their IEP. And then when I think about like accessibility and equity, I'll think about like, kind of what you all have hit on, like internet, which districts aren't paying for internet services, and nobody's really giving them out. They're saying, oh, your district has to sign up for this program or your district has to sign up for that program. But it's not like, here you go, here's your Wi-Fi. And then like we have to find computers. There's a shortage of computers. Like nobody knew this was gonna eventually happen because we were never prepared for this one-to-one where every student has a computer until this moment. And then I think about equity in the sense kind of what you were hitting on, Kelsey, about discipline. How are you gonna suspend somebody outside of school when they are already at home? So what are we even thinking about on discipline? Like we need to really focus in on how we discipline our kids, which really is the focus point for what I'm about to say, which is that this is the literal shift in education this is a moment where we are changing what looks like what's equitable. We are changing what is accessible. We are changing how we teach. We are changing how we make sure that our students are doing what they need to do. And I think that the NAACP, and I think that a lot of other organizations need to hone in on this very moment and say, listen, what we've been doing before does not work anymore. We have to change what we're doing. We have to make sure that we take what we're getting right now, because we're getting a lot of data. We have to take this data, we have to compile this data, and then we have to work to figure out how we can make this work for our kids, because we've been left behind for so long. It's not even funny.
In real perspective, we as civil rights leaders, or just leaders in general for our community, we got to be part of this conversation, because everything with how we're changing policies, we always got to have a strategy. And that, I will end with that.
So now this will be closing out our evening. Thank you all so much. I feel so honored to be moderating this panel because it was fantastic. You all had such great thoughts and perspectives on the issues, and I'm sure that the youth are going to love hearing everything you all have to say.
Hey everybody, thank you for joining our panel discussion. My name is Isaiah Hoskins. I have the privilege and honor of being the Vice Chairman for the National Youth Works Committee. The purpose of the National Youth Works Committee is to be a body of regional representatives, appointees that make recommendations to the Board of Directors, and also express youth interests. Our focus this year is to support young people as we transition back to school in the midst of a global pandemic. Also, while our country is going through internal reformation with our police departments. I know this year's convention is a little different. With that being said, we have to show up to the space and be intentional, inspire each other, motivate each other, challenge each other to ensure that our communities matter. I'm hopeful of our future. I'm hopeful because we have a generation that's on the rise. A generation that is motivated, innovative, and determined to make a difference. I'm a member of that generation. You're a member of that generation. Happy 111th National Convention.